Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of News for Normies, where I bring you the top news stories from the past week in a somewhat short time frame. If you enjoy this video, like what I do, hit that like button, share with your friends, and go over to Rumble because YouTube is run by liberal communists. So, with that being said, I'll jump right into this. First, don't know if this video is going to act right this week. I know last week it was kind of glitching out a little bit, so apologies ahead of time if that does it again this week. Okay, now to the news. So last week, meaning before last Saturday, as I record this, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, had a meeting with Trump and Vance at the White House and proceeded to act like an ungrateful ass. Because of that, this week, Trump has suspended all military aid to Ukraine and says that he will uphold this stay of military aid until Zelensky is ready for a peace deal and publicly apologizes for his behavior while at the White House. Now, in response to this, Zelensky did send a letter to President Trump apologizing for his behavior, but it is unclear at this time whether Trump will offer more military aid. However, Europe is finally stepping up their game, as Britain, France, and several other European countries have vowed to give military support and put boots on the ground in Ukraine for peacekeeping operations once a peace deal has been reached. But to me, this seems like Europe is inching closer to World War III. There have been several leaders of European countries that have made videos in the past and very recently as well saying, Putin must be defeated, he's a dictator, blah, blah, blah. So with that kind of rhetoric going on and them saying that they're going to put boots on the ground, definitely doesn't give me good feelings about that, let's just say. Speaking of Trump and foreign wars, President Trump issued a threat to Hamas saying they should release all hostages or Israel, quote, will finish the job, end quote. While I agree with the sentiment here, I also think we need to stop funding Israel's wars because, like I've beaten a dead horse into Elmer's glue at this point. Our roads here in the U.S. are subpar. Our schools need funds, and I'm tired of a levy coming up every year asking for more money when the schools get a new football field every 2 years. So, as we've seen, the U.S. government likes to piss our money away, and I'm tired of funding everybody else's wars while our shit's going bad and falling apart. Israel is a very developed nation, so if they want to wage a war, then they should tap into their own tax base to fund it themselves. That's just my opinion on the matter. Big story here, which will lead into a couple other little stories after this. President Trump delivered a speech in a joint session of Congress on Tuesday that was essentially a State of the Union address. Now, it's not an official State of the Union because presidents typically don't do that until, their first year of their term is up. So that's why it's a joint session of Congress, not necessarily a State of the Union address. Anyway, getting a little esoteric, Democrats showed their true colors as Democrat Al Green had to be removed by the Sergeant of Arms for disruptive conduct during Trump's speech. I'll get to more on that in a moment. In this address, Trump talked about the accomplishments of his administration so far, such as cracking down on illegal immigration, starting to get the process of getting our economy back on track, and constantly slammed the Biden administration for just being absolutely awful. If you're watching this, you probably agree, because grocery prices are way more than they used to be. All the wars that happened under the Biden administration, the illegal immigration that happened under his administration, and on and on and on. And this part is absolutely sick to me. The only time that Democrats clapped or cheered during President Trump's speech was when he talked about Ukraine, which is funny because he, was very blatant that he wanted to end this war and, didn't want to keep funding it anymore. But they're like, woo, Ukraine! But this is absolutely disgusting to me because the Democrats didn't even applaud a 13-year-old kid who beat brain cancer. Yeah. Mind-boggling. And they didn't even clap or, have any kind of sympathy when Trump talked about the death of Laken Riley, who was murdered by an illegal alien because of Biden's failed policies. Yeah, it's just absolutely disgusting to me, Democrats' behavior during this. So, in true fashion, corporate media talking heads like Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow showed how much of a cult the Democrat Party is by having some of the worst takes after Trump's speech, saying things like, quote, "I hope DJ Daniels has a long life and doesn't commit suicide after defending the Capitol from Trump people," end quote. And scorning Trump for talking about DJ Daniels and the families of people like Laken Riley who were there in attendance to the speech. And like I previously just mentioned, DJ Daniels is a 13-year-old boy who had undergone, I think, like 13 or 14 surgeries to beat brain cancer, and he was being bullied at school for wanting to be a police officer. Now, I loved this part of Trump's address. During his speech, he actually named young DJ Daniels to be an honorary member of the Secret Service. So, when Democrats only cheered for a war that has killed a lot of people and not for a 13-year-old boy who beat brain cancer, it shows how sick and twisted these people are. And it just shows that Democrats, at least at the higher levels like that, cannot be reasoned with or find any common ground with reasonable people. Now, I wanted to point out the Democrats at the top because you may have Democrat coworkers who are a little more reasonable than the people they elect, but not going to get on that tangent right now. So Congress was set to censure Al Green for his disruption during Trump's speech. However, because the Democrats in D.C. are absolutely insane, they proceeded to sing and otherwise obstruct the hearing of Al Green's censure. In response to this, House Speaker Johnson simply sent the process into recess and just kind of let it go for the day. Instead of Republicans wielding the power that we voted them in for and having these people walked out by the Sergeant of Arms and fined for disrupting a government proceeding, just like they wanted all of the J6 people to do. Republicans, why are you so weak and feckless? It just blows my fucking mind. I know the joke has been made in the past that, I hope Trump is I hope we get the Trump that the left claims he is. Yeah, I want more Republicans in D.C. to do that kind of stuff too. Lay the hammer down on these people when it's absolutely necessary. Anyway, and rant. So this is one that I disagree with people on the right for, but I will address this here. The Supreme Court essentially upheld a lower court's ruling that mandated the payment of nearly $2 billion to a USAID program by the Trump administration. While the people on the right are upset because of all the waste and abuse that has gone on with USAID, the payment is for services that were already agreed to, so the government is basically locked in, legally locked into a contract, for lack of better words. However, with all of the corruption that we've seen with USAID, hopefully this kind of stuff doesn't happen going forward. And hopefully USAID just kind of gets shut down as a whole. So this one here is kind of scary to me. The federal government is considering the use of AI technology to crack down on foreign college students here in the U.S. who are pro-Hamas. Now, while I agree with the sentiment, and also agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization, I am very skeptical about this act. For one, I don't see how this isn't a violation of the First Amendment, although if it's for foreign students who are here on like a college visa, maybe it doesn't fully apply. Don't know, not a constitutional scholar. Just kind of seeing common sense things here. But also, this gives me fears that this could be another Patriot Act in the making. Sure, in the interim, it could be used to crack down on bad faith actors here in America, but who's to say going forward in the future, the federal government doesn't label, I don't know, a particular presidential candidate as a terrorist sympathizer, and anybody who supports that candidate is then stripped of their rights and thrown in jail. Not like we haven't seen that already or anything of the sort, but, the Patriot Act was supposed to crack down on Islamic radicals in the U.S., and then it turned into a legal spying apparatus that is used to spy on literally every single person in the U.S. 24 hours a day. So, there you go. The government's trying to spy on you even more. One moment here. All right. This one is a little weird. AOC previously employed an illegal alien to work on her political campaigns, but the good news is that this individual has already self-deported. How he even got hooked up with working for a political candidate is, I don't know, that seems a little weird to me, but in the end, I'm glad that tax dollars weren't wasted on this person to get rid of them. He overstayed his visa and just kind of stayed chilling out in New York or whatever, and then he was like, oh, well, time to go, and just left. So, bye. Oh, one of my favorite topics to talk about, the FBI. So a man by the name of James Dennehy, who was the head of the New York FBI office, was forced to retire after the accusations that his office was hiding Epstein files from the federal government. Kind of weird timing and all that, but okay. But speaking of the Epstein files, where are all the files, Pam Bondi? We were promised a release of all the Epstein stuff like 2 weeks ago, and that hasn't happened yet. Thought you had all the stuff on your desk. Thought you already had the information and were ready to release it, but it hasn't happened yet. Where are the files? Quit playing games and release them. At this point, I don't care if Republicans get caught in the crossfire too, because if they're implicated on that list, then they need to go to jail too. At this point, I have no sympathy for politicians in this regard. So, yeah. At this point, I think Pam Bondi needs to be removed. I didn't like her going in the first place, and she needs to be replaced with somebody who's actually competent and could get this job done. Yeah, I've told you in the past, she was a bad pick, and here's another reason why. Man. Speaking of federal agencies, Doge uncovered CIA black sites around Virginia by accidentally posting properties that the agency owned for sale. From my understanding, the properties were put up on real estate sites like Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever. Excuse me. But when the CIA realized, like, oh shit, those are our properties, they were quickly taken down. Weird how that works. But the bigger picture here is that the CIA is not supposed to be operating within the United States. So this is a big no-no and should raise some questions for the average taxpayer and voter in this country. Why is the CIA operating within the United States? Wonder. It's also weird, kind of going back to the previous story, why we don't have the Epstein files, JFK files, MLK files, RFK files all released at this point. Kind of weird, ain't it? Anyway, moving on. Elon Musk's team at Doge uncovered more shady money, but instead of being USAID this time, it was going to a nonprofit organization called Act Blue. If you've followed my channel for a while, you know I've talked about this group before, but if you're new here, Act Blue is basically a fundraising organization for the Democrats and Democrat campaigns, and that's why we've had a lot of, that's one reason why we've had a lot of the things boil up to what they are today. However, because of Elon Musk's team at Doge uncovering this stuff, Act Blue is essentially in chaos internally, and has lost several top leaders of the organization. So, the more that the Democrats are in chaos, the more I feel better about it, because, I mean, I've been very open about my political beliefs. And this just makes me smile a little bit, I guess. I don't know. But speaking of Democrats, everyone's favorite Democrat, or most hated Democrat, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, has started his own podcast instead of taking care of his state, and had Charlie Kirk on his first episode. If you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, he is a right-leaning political correspondent, I guess you could say. He does a lot of political work for the Republican Party. And gonna be fully open on this one. I didn't listen or watch this podcast. I will not give any kind of support to Gavin Newsom, but Democrats are pissed about this. But personally, I think it was a brilliant move. As some have speculated, it seems like Gavin Newsom is trying to moderate the Democrat Party a little bit, because of some things that he said in this conversation. And because of that, it seems like he is vying for a run for president in 2028. Now, some things that came up in that conversation were the topic of transgender individuals, which I think is probably the one that pissed people off the most. But even Gavin Newsom said that men don't belong in women's sports, which is more of a right-leaning position in today's world, even though it's kind of common fucking sense. So yeah, that's why I say it seems like he's trying to bring the left kind of back, into sanity a little bit. So we'll see how that all works out for him. But if he does run in 2028, I will beat that horse into Elmer's glue too, because we've seen how he's ran California into the ground. I don't want him to do the same thing with the entire country. But speaking of people and insane things they've said, Ben Shapiro recently made a case on his show that President Trump should pardon Derek Chauvin on all federal charges. Now, if you were asking yourself, who is Derek Chauvin? He was the police officer who had arrested and was trying to detain George Floyd before Floyd's untimely passing. Now, Ben Shapiro did bring up some points. The autopsy showed that George Floyd did not die from asphyxiation. He had a lot of drugs in his system at the time. If I remember correctly, he had some heart conditions going on. So there was a lot of stuff that led to George Floyd's death. And personally, I think Chauvin may have been raked over the coals a little bit during the aftermath of George Floyd's death. But I also think this would be a very bad move for the Trump administration to take. Because if they pardoned Chauvin on all federal charges, the left would immediately start rioting and burning cities down again in another summer of love like they did in 2020. Now, not saying Chauvin is completely innocent. I've watched the videos too. He was leaning on George Floyd's back. Definitely not smart. Probably had a contributing factor to his death. So that's why I say Chauvin may have been raked over the coals a little bit, but this would be a very, very bad move to take. Plus, if he was pardoned on federal charges, there were still state charges in play, so he wouldn't be released from prison. However, the left would run with, Trump pardoned Chauvin who killed George Floyd, and off to the races we go. So, definitely a bad move. Our neighbors up north are continuing to make bad moves too, because Canadians are still trying to play tough with America by continuing to double down on tariffs against the United States, even though they already have exorbitant tariffs on American goods like cars, dairy products, lumber, and more. If my memory serves me correctly, I heard this week that Canada has something like a 250% tariff on dairy products coming into Canada from the US. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. If you're watching this, you're on the internet, you can easily look up Canadian tariffs on American goods, and you could find this information for yourself. So in similar manner, Canadian Premier Doug Ford said he will cut electrical power to Americans, quote, with a smile on my face, end quote, due to tariffs. If you're wondering who this guy is, so in Canada, the country's broken up into provinces. Think our states. So the premier of a province is essentially like a governor of one of our states here in the U.S. There you go. This is a very, I guess, frightening thing, for lack of better words, because, people lose electricity. People could die, diabetics who have insulin have to keep it cold. They could die from diabetes complications. Plus, it's up in the north, so it gets cold. If people lose power to turn on heat in their homes, they could literally freeze to death. So, in my opinion, just my opinion here, if one American dies because this dude does this, which I highly doubt it will happen, I think we should just annex Canada and make them part of the United States, but more like a territory with no voting power, because, they're just going to vote for, free healthcare, even though they're taxed entirely way too much too, and their healthcare system, you break a toe and go to the doctor, and they're like, have you considered suicide? Because they have a program called MAID, and that's kind of how it goes. Oh, you're sad? Kill yourself. There you go. Also, by the way, I'm not censoring myself and using terms like unalive yourself, because I'm not doing that shit. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, go over to Rumble, and you can get all this stuff, uncensored and brought to you like any normal person would talk if they're at the water cooler or the bar. Okay. Last little story here, ending on some good news. The state of West Virginia is pushing a bill that would ban artificial food dyes in food sold within the state of West Virginia, which may be the first country or the first state in the country to do so. This bill would go into effect January 1st of 2027, which would then require food companies to alter their ingredients to do away with artificial food dyes. So I am all for this, because, I mean, just go to Walmart anytime and you'll see people riding around on the little rascal scooters, filling up their basket with Doritos and Mountain Dew. It's like, dude, that's the whole reason you're in the rascal scooter in the first place. But I hope that this goes through, and I hope other states do the same, or companies that produce food products start making changes on their own for products they sell in other states. either way, I see this as a win for the American people to get people healthy again. And maybe going forward, healthcare could be cheaper because, if you weigh less and take care of yourself, then you don't need to have as many medications on a daily basis. So, yeah, that's all I got for this week. Cutting it a little short at about 25 minutes. So, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, share this with your friends. Share it with some normies in your life because that's why I do this. And I will bring you all some more content next week. So thank you, take care, and I'll see you then.